Introduction. Thousands of years ago in China, people made an important discovery. They found out that caterpillars of one kind of moth spin cocoons of silk. And better yet, they found out that the cocoons could be unwound and the silk thread could be woven into fabric. Silk fabric is shiny. It is soft and smooth to touch. It is very light in weight. And it can be dyed in beautiful colors. In blue, under the picture, it reads, "The caterpillars that produce valuable silk are commonly called silkworms, even though they are not really worms." At the top of page 3, under the picture, in blue, it reads, "Silk is strong. A thread of silk is stronger than some kinds of steel of the same thickness." For thousands of years, the Chinese were the only people who knew how to produce silk cloth. People in other countries wanted to trade for the precious silk fabric. Traders traveled to and from China on one main road. They traded goods such as spices, glass, and gold for silk. Sometimes they even traded horses for silk. Over time, this route became known as the Silk Road. Chapter 1. Silk is discovered in China. According to an ancient Chinese fable, silk was discovered in China 5,000 years ago. Storytellers might have told the story like this. Long ago, in the time of our ancestors, there was an empress named Shi Ling Shi. She was wise and beautiful. One day, the empress was in her garden having tea under a mulberry tree. Something fell into the hot tea. It was a cocoon. She looked up and saw other cocoons hanging from the branches. Small white caterpillars were spinning the cocoons. Others were eating the leaves of the tree. She picked up the cocoon in her teacup. To her surprise, she saw that the cocoon was made of one long thread. Shi Ling Shi had discovered silk. In blue next to the picture, it reads, "Each silkworm cocoon is made up of a single thread of silk. This thread can be up to half a mile, 80 hundredths kilometers long." At the top of page 5, in blue next to the picture, it reads, "Silk cloth was used to make imperial robes for China's rulers." Shi Ling Shi had the idea of turning the silk threads into yarn. She even invented looms to weave the silk yarn into fabric. From then on, making silk became a part of China's heritage. The people of China raised mulberry trees and silkworms, the little white caterpillars that Shi Ling Shi saw on farms. Women worked in rooms full of long trays of silkworms. They fed the silkworms mulberry leaves, the only food they would eat. The silkworms spun cocoons. The women unwound the silk thread. Weavers made silk yarn and wove silk cloth. Only the people of China made silk. How silk is made. Number 1. Female silk moths lay eggs on mulberry trees. Number 2. The larvae, silkworms, hatch and begin to eat the leaves. Number 3. The silkworms spin cocoons. Number 4. The cocoons are steamed and put in hot water. Number 5. The cocoon thread is unwound. Number 6. The threads are twisted together into yarn. Number 7. The yarn is dyed. Number 8. The dyed yarn is woven into cloth. Breeding silkworms. To create a cocoon, the silkworm releases a liquid that hardens into a silk thread when it is exposed to the air. The silkworm uses this thread to spin its cocoon around itself. While inside its cocoon, the silkworm begins to pupate into a moth. When it is fully grown, the moth breaks open its cocoon. This causes the silk thread to shred into many pieces. That's why most of the cocoons are steamed before the moth is fully grown. Killing the silkworm before it becomes a moth keeps the silk thread in one piece. Some silkworms are allowed to become moths. They are needed to make more eggs. Under the picture in blue, it reads, "Silk moths, which are adult silkworms, exist in captivity only. They cannot survive on their own." Chapter 2. The Silk Road. For a long time after silk was discovered, only the emperor and his family wore silk. Later, other wealthy Chinese families began wearing silk clothing. By about 500 BC, silk was being produced in several Chinese provinces. People all over China began wearing silk. When people from other countries saw the shiny cloth, they wanted it too. But the Chinese were the only ones who knew how to breed silkworms and how to make silk. Outsiders wanted to trade with China for silk. The Chinese figured out how to get silk to them. A 5,000-mile, 8,047-kilometer road connected China, India, Persia, now Iran, and the Roman Empire. Soon the most important product traded on this road was silk, so it came to be known as the Silk Road. Since China was the world's only supplier of silk, this gave the country a lot of power. It could charge a high price for the fabric. Under the map in blue it reads, "The Silk Road connected China with countries eager to trade silk for other goods. The cities marked were trading centers along the way." The Chinese tried to preserve the secret of silk marking for as long as possible. Chinese people guarded the secret with their lives. Sharing or stealing silk-making knowledge was a crime. Anyone who got caught was put to death. Traveling along the Silk Road was dangerous. Silk traders had to journey across dry, hot, and windy deserts. They traveled in camel caravans loaded with goods. They had to cross over high, icy mountains too. But rough weather conditions were not the only threats on the Silk Road. Thieves along the path stole silk and other goods. Traders had to travel in large groups with guards. Silk's value. During China's Han Dynasty, pieces of silk served as money. Soldiers were paid with silk, and people paid taxes with the fabric. The government bought the friendship and control of hostile groups with silk. Camels hauled silk and other goods along the Silk Road. In many cases, traders from the West did not travel the complete length of the Silk Road themselves. Instead, the silk passed through hands of many traders between China and the final buyers. This added to the cost of moving goods. China gained most of the wealth it earned from the silk trade during the Han 206 BC to AD 220 and Tang AD 618 to 907 dynasties. In blue it reads, "This is the Silk Road as it looks today." Ideas spread along the Silk Road. People who used the Silk Road shared ideas about religion and art. For example, Buddhism, a religion, came to China from India. Buddhists built temples in China. People in China shared their ideas about the stars, mathematics, and papermaking with traders from the West. Under the picture in blue it reads, "This is a very old sculpture of Buddha Center. There are many images of Buddha in temples throughout China." Chapter 3. The Secret Gets Out. Once China began to trade silk cloth with other countries, the secret of how to make silk became more and more difficult to keep. Some people who left China to live in other countries brought the secret with them to their new homes. People in Korea, India, and Persia began to make their own silk. New traders competed with China. The ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire between the years AD 527 and 565 was a man named Justinian. Justinian wanted silk, but he did not want to trade with Persia to get it. Persia and the Roman Empire were at war with each other. The part of the Silk Road that reached the Roman Empire ran through Persia. Justinian tried to find a trade route to go around Persia, but he was not successful. Eventually, people in the Roman Empire learned how to make silk. Once this happened, silk making spread throughout Europe. In about AD 550, some travelers from India told Justinian that they knew how his empire could make its own silk. The travelers brought silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds to Justinian. Then they showed Justinian's people how to care for the silkworms and harvest the silk thread. The Roman Empire finally had China's closely guarded secret of making silk. Justinian and his people were overjoyed to be able to make their own silk. Under the picture in blue, it reads, "Countries who wished to make their own silk needed to grow mulberry trees so they could breed silkworms. Justinian's visitors from India brought him seeds from the mulberry tree." China was no longer the only place people could get silk. As a result, China's silk trade began to drop off. Eventually, more trade between the East and West took place by sea routes instead of on the Silk Road. By about 1500, silk trade over the Silk Road ended. Silk timeline. 3000 BC. Silkworms and silk are discovered in China. Silk making begins. Wearing of silk clothing is reserved for the emperor and his family. 500 BC. Wearing silk clothing spreads into several regions of China. 200 BC. Silk Road to the west opens. China enjoys successful silk trade with other countries. AD 550. Silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds are obtained by the Roman Empire. AD 1500, trading of silk along the Silk Road ends. Chapter 4. Silk in Modern China. Today, China is not the only place in the world where silk is produced. Still, more raw silk is made in China than in any other country. Many people in China make a living from silk. One kind of worker breeds silkworm eggs. Others grow mulberry leaves to feed the silkworms once the eggs hatch. Farmers raise the silkworms and sell the cocoons to factories, which harvest them. Factory workers make silk fabric from silk yarn. Then, they make clothing and other items from the fabric. At the other end of the silk making process are the merchants who sell silk clothing. There are also people who sell silk to other countries. In blue, next to the picture, it reads, Chinese farmers still breed silkworms and harvest cocoons. Who makes silk today? In blue, next to the picture, it reads, China produces an amazing variety of silk. If you look at the pie graph, it shows China makes 54%, Japan in yellow makes 11%, India in orange is 14%, and in purple it says other countries, including Brazil, Italy, Thailand, and Russia, make 21%. 60 billion pounds of silk are made in China each year. This silk is used to make things like shirts, ties, and dresses, but the value of silk today is less than it was at the time of the Silk Road. Sales of silk make up a small part of China's economy. Conclusion. Silkworms and the fabric that can be made from silk were important discoveries. The Silk Road made it possible for China to share silk with the outside world. China grew wealthy from the silk it sold, and the Silk Road led to the spread of important ideas between the East and West. Over the years, silk became an important part of Chinese culture. At first, the Chinese were worried about letting out the secret of silk making. They needed the wealth that the silk trade brought them. China lost an important part of its economy when other countries learned how to make silk. But it gained something else. When silk making spread to other countries, a part of Chinese culture went with it. Stories and myths about China and silk making were shared with people from many different countries. In blue, next to the picture, it reads, This raw silk does not look anything like the beautiful and costly fabric it may become.